Righto, so welcome to the nervous system video. So we'll skip straight in. So what we're going to have a look at in this first one is the role of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, how they work together to pretty much respond to changes in the external environment or the internal environment to help keep you alive, and how all of that sort of functions and that role actually occurs. So what does it look like for you to be successful in this? It's about understanding key structures of the different types of neurons or nerve cells and the function of those nerve cells, because they all, while they work in a similar way, you want to be able to distinguish between them and why they look the way that they do and how that sort of suits their function. Also, you want to be able to understand the different parts or components of the central nervous system and the periphery nervous system, and understand the differences between voluntary and involuntary responses. And here is a cat. All right, so when we have a look at our nervous system, one of the key things that we need to be able to understand is that our nervous system is made up of two sort of subcomponents. So we've got our central nervous system, so the brain and the spinal cord, primarily responsible for storing, arranging, managing information, processing information, and being able to instigate responses that are both conscious and somewhat unconscious. And then our peripheral nervous system, so our PNS, which is the transmission of information. So one is about pretty much the processing and use of information, whereas the other type of nervous system we talk about being the sort of the transport network where information is sent and received from. So starting with the central nervous system, we look at the brain. So the brain is the key part of our central nervous system. It is responsible for determining what is the action essentially that our body is going to take when there is a change in the external environment. So the change is detected, we get the information sent to our brain or our spinal cord, and depending on whether that's a process that we have to consciously think about or unconsciously deliver a response, our brain is really a key player here. The spinal cord is involved as well. It is a direct link between our brain and our periphery nervous system, so the transmission of information. And also what we'll talk about as well is it plays key roles in autonomic responses as well. So that's sort of key processing center. When we get into the peripheral nervous system though, this is when we talk about the nervous system responsible for both voluntary and involuntary responses. So when I talk about voluntary transmission of information, that's when we're talking about things that are consciously transmitted. So when we determine that we're going to move our mouth, for example, or move our hands or whatever it is, that comes under the somatic or voluntary peripheral nervous system, which is an instruction given from the central nervous system. There is our autonomic or involuntary system as well that exists within the peripheral, and that's responsible for helping to keep you alive. So that's involuntary things that you don't consciously think about. Your brain doesn't actively have to process and continue to use energy to determine, does I need to do this? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do this? The autonomic nervous system within the peripheral is actually responsible for basically all those things that help to keep you alive without you consciously thinking about that. So things like heart rate variability and changes and things like that. Glands, whether they're activated or whether they're not activated, so whether you're actively producing hormones to help instigate change somewhere else in the body, that kind of stuff. Peristalsis or a lot of other functions that just occur when you don't even consciously think about it. So I guess when you think about the peripheral nervous system, think about subcategorized into things that are consciously done. So movement, probably the key ones, or looking and stuff like that, things that are consciously thought about, and unconscious thinking, or ones that you don't think about at all, I should say. That's probably the better way, autonomic responses. All right, and I guess one of the big things here is that there are a couple of key differences between basically the nerves that exist, which we'll look at on the next couple of slides anyway, the structures and their functions, and also the things that help transmit messages, so the neurotransmitters that exist within these specific nervous systems as well. So we'll kick on with that on the next video.